we met each other at university. So this was in 2000.
Yeah, I met Ben the first week of uni, panicked and made friends with him, and we've been mates ever since.
And we both moved pretty much straight out of university down to London, and actually moved in together in a flat in Brixton. James was studying law and I was working at a software company. Both of us pretty much hated our jobs and what we were doing, and I think it was then really that the seeds were sort of sown, the idea of getting away and having an adventure, and
I think we just fed up with commuting really, and it seems like an extreme way out, but that was the idea, wasn't it?
Yeah,
just a big adventure.
We read quite early on about someone who had done the Pacific. I think James read about it, and the idea just came up. Actually, initially to row the Pacific, that was what we wanted to do to begin with for quite a while. I mean, this must have been in 2005, I guess, and so 5-6 years really of saving, and obviously it was such a long period of time that there was a lot of moments when it felt like it might not happen, or but I think we started pretty much saving money almost immediately. I moved very soon after this to Uganda to start working out there, and James
I moved to the Channel Islands, Alderney in the Channel Islands, but we were always saving bits of money every month, just always talking about it and trying to work out a way of doing it, but it did take a long time to get to the start line. I don't think either of us had actually rowed at all before we decided to row across the Indian Ocean, but we were always into sort of sports, and
always loved playing sports, squash, golf, but as James said, we hadn't done any rowing really, or any sort of sailing or anything sea-based really until quite soon before actually.
It took a lot of planning, logistical planning, sort of working out how much food we needed to take and learning how to use all the equipment and doing navigation courses. Training wise, we did rowing on the Thames here at the Skiff Club, and we also ate incredible amounts because we were trying to put on weight, because we knew we'd be losing 2 to 3 stone. So it was 6 months of eat whatever you want to excess, which was good.
I guess the real planning, as in getting the boat ready and everything, started in January 2011. I mean, that's when we both quit our jobs. I came back from Africa. We were both based in London. And then that's when we really started actually working on the boat and getting the food. And
we bought the boat second hand from some guys who'd done the Atlantic. So it was built at Rossiter Yachts, and it did the Atlantic twice by the time we got it. So I wouldn't say it was knackered, but it was definitely second hand. And it's 23 foot, and they're all designed to be self-righting. So if you do capsize, they come straight back up. They've got a water maker, which is powered by solar panels. So you've got this desalinator, which gives you fresh water. Ours broke, but in theory they work. And a GPS, again powered by the solar panels. And
again, ours broke.
Pretty much everything we had broke at some stage. And they've got 2 rowing positions, one in front of the other, and a watertight sleeping cabin at the back. The aft cabin is watertight. And apart from that, they're very simple. It's just an open rowing boat, basically.
Yeah.
I think the thing about the Indian Ocean is that because it's only really been rowed once in 2009, when there was a race across in 2009, we had very little to go on. So the 2 pairs that completed in 2009 did it in 102 and 103 days. So our minds were always planning roughly on 100 days, but the weather we experienced was I think quite a bit worse than that.
I mean, I guess our main goal really was
to get across
and enjoy it, and we were very both of us were very aware that we didn't want to sort of go for a record and not enjoy the experience. I think we mainly wanted to get across, and also I think especially on the Indian Ocean records, because obviously the weather between years can change so significantly, and you are a sort of real slave to the weather, because you can only do so much if you have headwinds or you have that counter current. So I think to get across and get as much out of it as possible.
I think and only 25% of pairs boats that attempted the Indian had actually succeeded. So we knew it was a very low success rate. So just getting across was our only aim. We've had incredible support from Quba, who gave us the jackets, the X10 jackets, and we also had the Quba logo on our boat.
Yeah, the jackets were an incredible. The one thing that we didn't realise at the start was how cold it was going to be. I think we both had this perception of the Indian Ocean as being sort of lovely, warm, calm, and
tropical waters. Yeah.
And very early on, we realised that it was actually very, very cold. Yet all the wind comes up from the Southern Ocean, so it's freezing. So I can't remember how many times we sort of, I mean, without those jackets, we would have been really suffered. We flew into Perth, and we then where we left from was a place called Geraldton, which is about 300 kilometres north of Perth. It's quite a small town, mining town, and we were there for probably about 3 weeks in the end, I guess.
Yeah.
We had a lot of problems getting the boat out of customs in Australia because of the food and a few other reasons. So the boat got up to Geraldton very late.
Getting away from the Australian coast is incredibly hard, because you want to get into deep water as soon as possible, and there's a continental shelf that stretches about 500 miles off the coast of Australia, and we left from Geraldton because we thought it would be the best place to get into deep water, but we still had to contend with this shelf, and a localized weather effect, which is basically an onshore wind which picks up at night and sort of literally sucks you back to Australia.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the beginning we were very concerned and worried because the boat was very heavy, and obviously we had never really spent a night at sea in an ocean rowing boat. So it was a very exciting time, but it was also very nerve-wracking because we just wanted to get away from land, and the boats are not very manoeuvrable. So you just want to be in the middle of the ocean is safer than close to any kind of land. I
think it was in the end about 12 days before we actually got off this effect you have on the shelf, where you have, because the water's quite shallow, so the waves are very choppy, and as James was saying, every time it gets dark, these winds just sort of suck you back into shore. And
about 100 miles off the coast of Australia there's a major shipping lane as well, which we spent some interesting nights just trying to call up these massive cargo ships, 50,000 ton vessels bearing down on you on the VHF radio, and sometimes they'd hear you and sometimes they wouldn't. So that was interesting.
We were sort of stuck in the middle of that for about 3 days.
The beginning was tough. The beginning was really, it was tough. Here's Ben taking our lats and longs down from the GPS. Soon to be charting our position on the map. Ben, how do you think we're making for progress?
Good progress, 31 miles yesterday, 31.2 to be precise. We're 25 degrees south, 102 degrees east.
We had a GPS, pretty decent Garmin GPS, which was powered from the solar panels, and we'd set waypoints every 100 miles. I suppose when you're crossing an ocean that big, you don't need to sort of steer too close a course, so we gave ourselves quite a big corridor, which in theory would get narrower as we got closer to Mauritius. Our GPS ended up breaking on day 75, so after that we relied on a handheld GPS, but because most of our batteries were spoiled, we could only turn the handheld on every 6 hours, so we never knew exactly where we were, but we had quite a good idea.
I mean, the strange thing was people tracking us on the website probably had a better idea of where we were than we did.
Yeah, we did get people telling us every so often that we were going backwards. Much colder than we thought, and at times very rough at the beginning, especially because a lot of the swell comes up from the Southern Ocean, and there were some big seas.
And it's generally hitting the side of the boat as well, so the waves are sort of going over the boat most of the time when you're trying to row. I mean, it felt very big, the seas. Very wet, quite windy, very unexpected, really.
But then occasionally it could be completely flat calm, everything could die, and it would be so flat that you could see the reflection of the clouds in the sea, and there wasn't a breath of wind, and then it would be very hot. But as soon as the wind picked up, it was cold again.
What we did probably the most was our shift patterns were 2 hours on, 2 hours off during the day, and then 3 hours on, 3 hours off at night. So we also kept, by and large, to the same rowing time. So, for example, James would always row from 7:30 in the morning to 9:30. I'd do 9:30 to 11:30, sort of, etc., etc., just to try and get ourselves into a bit of a pattern. When you weren't rowing at night, it was sort of straight into the cabin and sleeping. The daytime, depending on the weather, sometimes it was quite nice to sit out on deck and put a line in and try and get some fish. Although that didn't happen that often. We did a lot of reading to each other because the iPods broke.
Yeah, we read Moby Dick.
Hi James.
Hi,
How's it going out there?
it's raining.
Well, the thing about the X10 jackets was, because we were so low to the water, I think the gunnels were only sort of 2 foot off the water level. We were just constantly swamped by waves, and when it rained, it could rain so hard you could barely see. So the jackets were just a lifesaver. We kept saying, and we're so lucky to have these, because the hoods would go up. They were fully waterproof. They were incredible. They kept you warm as well when the wind was coming from the south, and they just did everything. Yeah. They're exceptional. We had high calorie freeze dried food, which you basically just add boiling water to, and leave it for 5 minutes, and then serve on deck. It was pretty disgusting to start off with, but by the end, I think it was the best food I'd ever eaten.
Yeah, it was
spaghetti bolognese. But the meal times, you just look forward to them. It became the main thing in the day.
And what's for brekkie today?
Brekkie today we have porridge with sultanas with Snickers, some chocolate log.
One of my favourites.
in there. Pork sausage, omelette and beans. Cup of tea, some chocolate.
And then back on the oars.
Back on the oars. Woo!
I don't think we ever felt that we wanted to give up. I mean, there were very difficult times. I think the difficulty is it would have been very, very difficult to give up because there's just no one there. I mean, it would have, if one of us had been injured or one of us had been very ill, we could have called in a ship or something to come and rescue us. But it was never. It would have been
the logistics were very difficult to organise a rescue, and I think also the fear of failure. We just didn't want. We just didn't want.
We'd been planning for such a long time and dreaming about it for such a long time that I think for both of us there was just never going to be, unless one of us got badly injured or got very ill, there was never going to be sort of giving up just because we didn't want to be there.
I think among the highs were all the wildlife we saw. It was always a great experience. You know, no matter how difficult the day was, if you saw a whale or a big pod of dolphins, seabirds, it always kind of picked your spirits up and you remembered why you were doing it again.
Dorado!
The greatest day was we sort of had a halfway party.
wild party.
But I think it was on day 54 or day 58 when we had 2 bottles of champagne, we had a packet of cigarettes, and we made ourselves an amazing salad out of tin tuna because we never caught any, beetroot and sweet corn, and so just put the music on. It was a beautiful, clear sunset. It was a lovely evening. We sort of just sat there drinking champagne and eating what tasted like an amazing salad. I mean that was
surreal as well because we knew we were 1,500 miles from the closest land. It's just nothing, no one, no planes in the sky, ships on the water. It's just complete isolation. It was amazing. I think the nights were either the most amazing experience I think of my life really, or they were one of the worst as well, because when it was clear you just had the whole array of stars, shooting stars, the Milky Way. Every time you put the oar in the water, the bioluminescence would light up. So it was incredible. And you would just have all night to sort of get lost in your thoughts. However, when it was black and there were clouds and you couldn't see a single thing and you were getting slapped in the face by waves and it was raining, torrential rain, then it was pretty much the worst, scariest experience. Because you couldn't see anything. It was just so pitch black.
Just about to start the night shift. James doing the first 2 hours. Beautiful sunset this evening. Day 28 going into day 29. How are you feeling about the night shift, James, considering that we're getting a current pushing us back about 1 knot
Can't wait.
due east?
I'm really excited, pumped. Obviously we'll be rowing without going anywhere, just rowing to stay stationary, which is always a pleasure.
This is the sort of battle that we love.
This is what we thrive on.
It was very, very up and down. I think our emotions in general. I think, as James was saying, a bit like the nights. There was times when it was just so beautiful, and you realise why we wanted to do it in the first place. And if you had a beautiful night, or you had a sunset, or when we saw whales or dolphins, and you're on an incredible high. On the flip side, there were times when I think both of us just really and it could be caused by something small, or usually by the weather, or rowing for a day and going backwards sort of 10, 14 miles, and it could get you into so it was really up and down, I think.
There's a lot of physical pain as well, the salt sores, and we get claw hand where you've been gripping the oars and your hand's just like a claw, so then we'd drop things because our hands didn't really work, and it could be quite frustrating, the physical sort of deterioration.
The worst I think for both of us, the worst kind of pain we had was actually the salt sores, which developed basically anywhere, mainly on the bum actually, and that was made it almost impossible to sit down, especially when the weather was bad and we were constantly covered in salt, and because we never had enough fresh water, we weren't really able to get that off us.
The final day was interesting. I mean, we imagined the final day a lot. It would be our glorious kind of homecoming, and we'd be drinking gin and tonics at dusk with our girlfriends, and it was going to be incredible. Sadly, I suppose the sea never quite lets you have these moments. We were approaching Mauritius, and there was a very strong current pushing us south. So we couldn't get to the north end of the island where we were trying to go, but a very strong easterly wind was pushing us onto the shore. So we had to make the decision to try and enter through a reef on the southeast side of the island, which is very dangerous, but it was the only thing we could do because we were being pushed onto the coast. As we were getting closer to land, the weather was suddenly building, and we could see big rollers and breakers in towards the reef and the entrance where we were aiming for, and we requested a boat to come out and guide us in through the reef and give us a tow. Just as that boat emerged, we also saw an incredible wave, just like the like of which we hadn't seen at all when we were out at sea. It was a massive white roll there. It was just a wall of white water. And I think as soon as we saw it, we both knew we were going to capsize immediately. So we held on and took a deep breath, and then everything went black, and
it was huge, the size of the wave. I think we hadn't capsized up till then actually, but we both looked at each other when that was coming, and said that's going to.
It just demolished us. Yeah. It just snapped the antennae, it broke all the oars, ripped the seating positions apart. It was incredible. The force of it was amazing.
And so when we came up after that, I was sort of about 5 meters from the boat. James was a bit further away. The boat self-righted almost immediately. So we got back on the boat. At this point, there was only one oar left because the others had either broken or been washed away. So we let off 2 flares because the support officer had come out to meet us. So they were about 400 meters further out to sea, and I think we caught a glimpse of them, so we knew they were there, but they were quite far away from us. So we set off the flares just to let them know that we were in trouble. Inadvertently, both of the flares backfired into James. His one backfired into his hand, and my one backfired into his leg.
So I was bleeding quite heavily. I can't believe you shot me. and then we saw another wave coming, and we thought this one's going to capsize us again. We had no way of controlling the boat because we didn't have any oars. We had one, so we decided to just take our chances and jump in the water. We were going to try and hold on to the boat, but the wave just ripped the boat and it flew away in towards shore. So there we were, floating in the water in our cycling shorts, you know, having brushed our teeth, thinking we were going to come into land and get on ready. And then we were actually just sort of fighting for our survival, swimming in the sea. Then we tried to swim towards the boat, and we were ducking under the waves. Every time a roller would come in, we'd duck under and come back up. And we were catching glimpses of the boat. However, after about 10 minutes of swimming, the boat then disappeared.
We couldn't see it anymore. I mean, because what we found out after, because they had seen our boat go over the reef, so they'd come back in through the entrance to try and pick us up on the other side of the reef. So they completely disappeared at this stage. So we sort of made a decision, sort of made for us, that we'd try and swim around the lighthouse, which was about 1.5 miles from us, I think, and then swim into the channel where we thought the channel was, the entrance to the reef. By the time we got there, we had no choice really except just to swim across the reef and hope for the best. So we started swimming towards shore, getting hit by sort of wave after wave. We'd sort of grab onto each other because we decided at the beginning that the most important thing was we'd stay together. So we'd sort of we'd grab onto each other. The wave would push us down, we'd come back up, start swimming again. And I think eventually, I remember we sort of got push, and we got hit by a wave. And I remember looking back and James shouting, "I'm standing up, I'm standing up." So we'd really hit the reef at this stage.
The next wave just smashed us onto the reef. And then we were trying to crawl across the reef to get away from the breaking waves. So we were being cut, and bits of coral would break off, so we'd fall again, and it was quite painful experience crawling over coral. But we managed to get away from the breaking wave, and we were then sat quite calmly on the reef, and we then sort of thought, well, we'll wait because surely someone will come out and look for us and rescue us. And sure enough, about half an hour later, although we were getting very cold and sort of bordering on hypothermia, we saw a helicopter, and the helicopter did a few laps, and it actually passed over us at one stage, and the light illuminated us, and we're saved. We're kind of jumping up and down. It was like, it's going to be okay. But then we saw the helicopter circling, and then it disappeared. So then we had an interesting conversation about what we should do, or whether we should try and do anything. And it was
because we didn't know how much reef we had before, because there was a sort of reef, then the water gets deeper, and then it was about another 2 or 3 miles, I guess, to shore. So but we didn't know whether it was 20 meters of reef to crawl over, or 500 meters. In the end, it actually was about 300 or 400, so we would never have been able to get across. But what we were thinking was, if we just had enough, if the tide came in enough so that we had about a foot of water, a bit of clearance between us and the reef, we could probably swim and get across. Or we just sit there all night and get extremely cold.
But we were certainly a lot calmer, and we managed a few jokes. It was Ben's birthday the next day, so he was lining up for the worst birthday ever. We still had these cheap £2.99 Casio watches, which were still working, and after every single thing on our boat had failed or broken or whatever, it's slightly ironic that the only thing that still worked was the cheapest. But we were then sitting on the reef when we saw a light sweeping across, and we started shouting in unison and wolf whistling, and the light slowly came to rest on us. And it was actually some local Mauritian guys who'd come out. They'd heard we'd capsized, and they'd come out in a boat, and amazingly they'd found one of our oars floating not far from where we were. So they picked up the oar, and they managed to clamber across the reef, and seeing them was amazing. And
so the first people we'd seen for 116
first people we'd
days.
seen for 116 days, and they'd sort of saved our lives. So that was a great experience. I think they said it was quite bizarre seeing two naked bearded men clinging to each other. And they managed to float us across the corals on some mattresses, and then within half an hour we were in the hotel drinking beers.
Unfortunately, the boat got lodged on the reef sort of a few miles away from us, and it floated over when the tide came in, and so we don't know exactly what happened, but we believe that either the Coast Guard or some local fishermen looted pretty much everything from it, unfortunately the Quba jackets went, as did our life raft. And,
I mean, they took everything in value, so
Yeah.
the Quba jackets were, they obviously, some fishermen's very warm and dry at the moment, so all the Coast Guard or whoever took them is very happy.
Yeah. I think we
Not
I'd
rowing.
definitely never be rowing again. I mean, I'd love to, and I think we were both talking about when we were out there, how nice it'd be to sail, where you can sort of put the sail up and sit in the back and have a gin and tonic and watch the sunset. So that could be great. But I think, absolutely, we'll never row again.
Anything with a sail or a motor,
Yeah.
we're interested, but nothing man-powered.